Good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session for Wednesday, January 31st, 2024, 10:02 a.m. My name is Ty Mentor, Chair of the Board. To my left is Vice Chair Commissioner Fournier. We have Commissioner Carolina Mejia and Commissioner Emily Klaus through Zoom, and Commissioner Edwards will be joining us very shortly in the boardroom. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. We have a 1-hour session dedicated to CPED docket items. CPED standing for Community Planning and Economic Development. Informational session, we have our Director of Community Planning and Economic Development with us, his team members, as well as County Manager and Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell and Rob Gilder. So should I turn it straight to Josh, or?
I am going to turn it straight over to our planning team.
All right, thank you. I am Joshua Cummings, the Director of Community Planning and Economic Development, CPED. With us today, we have Andrew Bond, one of our planners, and Ashley Arai, our planning manager. I'd like to say just a quick shout out to Maya Teeple, who's done an amazing job over the past couple of years. She is now on maternity leave, but she did a great job standing up the team behind her, and I know that the transition to Andrew is going to be just fantastic. I've been encouraged by the attention to detail and the planning that Andrew has put into this document, and recognize that this is going to be a lot as we engage in this new process. But stepping back just a little bit, I wanted to provide some perspective that this docketing process takes an entire community. And that first group, and for those listening, the input from the residents and community is really important to get these information pieces in place. And so for those listening, participating is the first most important step in how we view the land use decisions for the Board of County Commissioners going forward. And so there's a community that provides the information and the input. And then there's the staff who does a great job of taking that information and coalescing it into something that the Planning Commission can digest and consider and research. And the staff also is an important piece in making sure that the process can withstand scrutiny if challenged or appealed in the future. And so that public process that the staff engages in ensuring that community input is listened to, provided then to the Planning Commission, and then ultimately to the Board of County Commissioners, provides an opportunity for stability in the decision-making process. So community, then to staff, Planning Commission, and the hard work that the Planning Commission has put in over the past couple of years is evident in the way that we've been able to, in the last year or so, knock through so many docket items in an effort to respond to community requests. And I just want to take just a moment to say to the Planning Commission, as you begin this new year and this restart, that the reading and the research and the engagement that you do, that then the Planning Commission provides solid recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners, is how the board is able to make such, I think, informed decisions. And so for those Planning Commissioners listening, I'm talking to you directly, thank you for your hard work on that, recognizing that it takes a lot of effort to go through so many comments. So thank you as you begin this new term and the newly reformed Planning Commission. I know that's going to be a heavy lift, and look forward to the next steps. And then that leads us to the Board of County Commissioners. And so the planning staff, our staff, wanted to take kind of a step back. In the past, we would have had this conversation probably starting at the end of February, maybe March, sometimes as late as April. But our staff knew that with this newly formed Board of County Commissioners in this new way, that we wanted to start early. And so this is going to be a step process. What you're going to hear from the staff today is the setup to ensure that the process is clear. And so some of the commissioners, this may be old hat to you, but I want to make sure that we do this in a methodical way so that the questions in the process that are answered are solid before we then get into the topics of the specific applications. We'll touch on those applications for sure today, but we'll go deeper into those applications at a future meeting. And I think that what the staff has constructed here is just a really important first step in understanding the baseline. And as we begin this process, it's important to always remember that there's never enough people to do all the great things that everybody wants to do all the time. And so we're going to have a conversation about staff resources, which then in the future will lead into the Board of County Commissioners prioritizing the applications that you receive. So that's a big setup to say we're going to go slow to go fast. We're starting earlier than usual so that we have the time to have the dialogue and the process. And your planning staff has done an amazing job, I think, of setting up the groundwork and trying to make this process more efficient. So we've done a great job in the past. There's more to do. We look forward to your input. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ashley and or Andrew.
So you're going to go over the process and the current docket items as they sit.
Heavy on the process today, and then light touch on the applications.
And I just want to say I'm happy to be here. It's going to be my first docketing briefing as well, so I'll be, have been learning and will continue to learn as we go through it. And yeah, also hoping to establish a good foundation as we move through. And then Andrew, it's your show.
Awesome. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
So Commissioners, Commissioner Mejia, I already see your hand. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that, with the docket items for the two new commissioners, if you remember how tough I was in whittling down the 50 priorities we had for the year, that's basically what it's like with the docket.
Thank you, Commissioner, right on. All right.
So let's jump right in. Today's presentation is on the 2024 to 2025 Comprehensive Plan and Development Code Docket Update. I'm excited to kick this year off. It's going to be a little bit different, and I'll go into that on the timeline, but today's presentation, we're going to go over just the docket process and the general timeline that we anticipate for this season, an overview of some of the docket proposals, staff resources and funding considerations, next steps, and then at the end we have questions, and then obviously if there are any questions during the presentation, feel free to chime in. So here's an overview of the docket process. In past, we would have the presentation with the projects and then go over the comments at the same time. So we're going to switch it up just a little bit and have a process-focused presentation today. We'll return on February 14th, where we'll go project by project to review each of them in greater detail. And then at that February 14th meeting, we will request that we open it up for the 20-day public comment period to have the community chime in as well, and then we'll continue on through the process. So what are the dockets? We have two dockets. We have the comprehensive plan docket, which encompasses sub-area plan, joint plans, any changes to the comprehensive plan. And as a reminder, those are adopted once a year. And so this past year, we had that big lump sum of joint plans that we adopted, and we had to do those all at once, and that's kind of the concept behind the comprehensive plan. The development code docket is a little more flexible, and when we can adopt things, those are going to be changes that we have to development regulations, regulatory regulations, permitting requirements, and so on. And those are a rolling adoption, so we can do them at any point during the year and consolidate them or do them as we see fit.
Yeah, and essentially the dockets are the work plan for our growth management services team, which lies within community planning.
So why do we docket? It is a requirement under the Growth Management Act to identify projects that are needed to adjust our comprehensive plan or development code regulations. We also have it outlined within Title II, defining the public process that we have to go through to initiate a docket and accept a docket. It is a wonderful time to provide public input. We do require that 20 days be open to the public to provide comments. It doesn't restrict them to providing comments now. Or at any point during the project's review. It just is a defined period. And it also gives the board the opportunity to align their work plan with the county's budget. So at today's meeting, we're not asking for any decisions. We're just kind of giving an overview of what docketing is. It is a great opportunity to ask questions on the process, work plan, budget, as well as general questions on any of the docket projects that are listed later on in the presentation. We're going to reserve adding or removing conversations until after we've had that 20-day comment period. So let's take a look back at the 2022 to...
I think there's a slide missing.
Oh, yeah, well, thank you. Double clicked. So following the 20-day comment period, we will have three options for each of the projects for the board to consider. The first is going to be adding it to a docket, and so either the comprehensive plan or the development code docket. The second is on hold or adding it to the preliminary docket. It doesn't mean the project is removed, it just means it's on hold until further consideration for the board. And then finally, removing the project entirety from the consideration. And with the removal, it would require that the applicant reapply if they were to want to go through the process again.
This is go ahead, Commissioner.
I was just gonna ask if you could and you had this one slide about the 2 kinds of dockets, but can you just kind of go a little deeper in terms of because from the board, at one level, they're almost the same to us, right? There's the same process, it's the docket, we prioritize them and stuff, but then there are distinctions between them, like one of them, I think one of them applicants pay a fee and one they don't, and one of them can be done once a year and once they can't, and one of them, just outlining where there's a meaningful difference versus they're kind of the same would be useful.
I'll jump back to that slide real quick.
Because I get when I was new on the board, I remember just getting kind of confused, there's these 2 separate lists, but we're talking about them as one thing, and why should I care what's on one list versus the other? Is there a limit to how many can be on one list versus the other? I don't think so, but
So Andrew will do, those are good questions. I'm gonna do a quick high level, the way that I understand comprehensive plan and development code docket. So comprehensive plan, vision, development code docket is how Brett and his group are implementing the vision with the rules.
They live in different places, right?
So they're both housed in long-range planning, but they're implemented. So the implementation of the vision happens here in long-range planning, and the development code is implemented every day when the permitters.
The development code stuff's not in the comp plan. The comp plan is it's a document that lives on its own.
There you go.
That has its own rules that can only be opened once a year, like some type of treasure chest.
Well, and so it's a vision, like a comprehensive plan, you don't want to be changing your vision all the time for land use. But with the development code, if there is something that pops up and you're like, man, we could do that better, if that isn't outside the bounds, we should change that rule so that the permit can go through more efficiently. So that's why the development code is rolling. It can be changed throughout the year. And the comprehensive plan, you don't want to change your end goal, right? But you might
It's like a
shift.
10-year, 20-year.
Exactly. Yeah, think of it like a road trip, right? You definitely want to go to Canada, but there's lots of ways to get there. And so on the way there, you might change it, and that's the development code. You might stop, have a pit stop, and you can change here and there. So you don't want to change your ultimate destination, that's the comprehensive plan, but you might think about better ways to get there, that's the development code.
And the point I wanted to make is that they are distinct, they're very distinct, but because they share so many elements of process, from a practical standpoint, they're almost like the same in our minds. Like we deal with them in the same way, on the same timeline, in the same prioritization process, in the same planning commission, I just wanted to kind of clarify where they're different and where they're the same.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the initial process improvements that we did about 5 years ago, was we didn't have them connected in the same briefings. So the comprehensive plan would come up and
That'd
then
be super confusing.
you'd be getting shot at from the side on the development code docket, and so there'd be all these different briefings, and the commissioners were like, well, which one are we doing, development code or comprehensive plan? And so we wanted to do them at the same time because it's the same people, some of the same bodies of work, but to Commissioner Mentzer's initial questions, the process for application is different, and the amounts for the application is different, and the way that we categorize it is different. So maybe that's where you jump in, Andrew.
Absolutely. So the comprehensive plan, we do have fees for community member initiated projects. And so we have an application fee and a CPED fee. For development code, we do not have a fee. So anyone can request a change to our development regulations, and those are brought forward. So thinking back to the no shooting zones and things like that.
Marijuana thing, is that part of the development code?
Yep, the
So
cannabis-related.
the guy who came in with that proposal, he didn't have to pay anything?
Correct.
He just proposed, and then we decide if we want to put it, and then,
Like what kind of, what are some more details? Like,
On the cannabis one in particular?
yeah, just as examples.
It's just changing terminology throughout the code to align with state. wording.
Updates to definitions and a relaxing of standards
minimum
related to where you can
acres.
grow it. There is a number of changes that cross, I think, 4 or 5 different chapters that were included in that one, but anyone can submit a proposal to be added to the development code docket. The other thing that projects that you'll see, and you probably have chatted with folks about that live in the comprehensive plan docket, are those site-specific rezones. So you might recall from last year, there was one called POG, a POG site-specific rezone. That is one that you might not think of as visionary, but because our future land use map is the same as our zoning map, any change to zoning is also gonna trigger a change to this sort of longer range vision, that the board has for land use in the county.
And the other thing that's parallel is because it's this, as Josh said, the same staff team doing it, when we talk about prioritization, we talk about staff resources and, you know, it's the same folks, so we have to they kind of compete with each other for prioritization for the board because it's the same folks that would be doing the work. So that's where they get very.
In the same planning commission, in the same board.
So this is one of the areas where I've always been fuzzy, is which docket and where does it live, but is the development code where all the specifics are, like setbacks and allowable uses and
That's right.
all of that's in the development side, and then the bigger stuff like zoning and programs, that's on the comprehensive plan
That's
side.
right, that's a good way to
Yep.
do it.
Okay.
How you implement it is the development code, and the bigger vision is the comprehensive.
So something like the proposal to expand the reach of the what's it called, the overlay, agritourism overlay, would that be a development code or a comprehensive plan?
Comprehensive plan.
Comp plan strategy, development code tactics.
There you go.
That-
Yeah.
Planning.
But what about uses within the existing agritourism?
Oh my God.
Okay, see,
So it can be both, right?
It's
So
subtle.
you got the vision, and then like, how do you implement it, right? So you have the objective, and sometimes you have to figure out how to.
so the map
implement
is
the
comp
tactics at
plan,
the same
but
time.
what you can do on the map is development code.
There you go.
There's my, as Edwards would say.
Truly.
And just to confirm, these aren't our rules, this is like state law.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's growth
These are
management
rules
act.
Josh made up.
We didn't make this up.
I made all this up.
All right.
And the board, and speaking of the state, the state gives broad discretion to a board to decide what goes on the docket and what gets put on hold or what gets removed.
And I will say that there's multiple lines to come in, right? So you've got the residents can propose either development code or comprehensive plan. Staff, so like Brett in development services will say, hey, we're having a hard time implementing X. Could we have something go before the board to help that even out? And the board can direct us. Hey, we're hearing this from our constituents. Can you take a look at how this would be applied? So like ADUs is a prime example of that. We were ahead of the curve because the Board of County Commissioners said, figure out how to get ADUs working in the county. And so we added that to our dockets because of those board. So just think that there's lots of ways to get in the door, and there's different doors to go through depending upon what the request is.
No shooting zones is sitting there because of a bunch of community input that I took from constituents in my district, and I promised to bring it to the board for consideration. We've never
Yeah.
docketed it, but it's there and that's where it came from the community.
And no shooting zones is an interesting one because it's outside of the land use code. It's in the public safety code, which is likely better housed with the sheriff's department. But since our group is good at process and public engagement, that's why we brought it to the Board of County Commissioners. That's why it came through our door. So that's a little bit of an anomaly because it's not land use, but we're good at process in terms of making sure the community has input. But it's your decision to decide whether or not to move forward on it.
And I know it's coming up, but everything in the docket translates into what resources do we have to actually do it.
Yep.
So that's part of the deliberation
I think that's in one of our slides.
I was reading ahead.
Thank you.
So just taking a look back at 2022 to 2023,
Commissioner Mejia, go ahead before we get on to the next slide.
Oh, no, I think Andy was about to review. I just wanted to, again, just give big props looking back at the completed projects from last year, and just how big they all were, and just great job.
The best example is this thing you shared with the planning commission, which is the old docket, and then like everything that was done was crossed off. Like, everything's crossed off, holy cow, we did a lot. Like, this is kind of the best visual, I think, for how much you guys actually accomplished.
It's good to hear. Maybe we'll dust that off, future briefing.
So just taking a look back, we knocked out quite a few joint plans, the industrial land study, the capital improvement program, as you'll see, both on the completed projects as well as the remaining projects. Because it is an annual update, it kind of just continues on. In total, between the development code docket and the comprehensive plan docket between 2022 to 2023, we finished 16 projects, which is the most we've completed in 15 years. And so props to us and props to the staff for knocking that out.
Commissioner Mansur was raising the roof.
Raising the roof on that one. That's pretty awesome.
We do still have some remaining projects on the docket, and some of those are kind of at the beginning and others are approaching the end. We do have quite a few still on the preliminary docket, and again, those are the projects that staff do not work on. They are just sitting there at the discretion of the board, and at any point, the board during docketing can add them to the docket or remove them from further consideration. Those are Upcastle, and we did receive those two applications, one from the initial application and a resubmittal, the Black Lake Quarry, the Port of Tacoma, and Scott Land Use Amendment and Rezone. Some of these are because the board didn't open docketing last year, but they submitted last year. They're automatically added to the preliminary until we have an opportunity to return back and consider them all. So some weren't necessarily added to the preliminary, they're just automatically added because we didn't open it.
Can we go back to the three options, the on hold page, that one? So this was, so when you talk about preliminary docket, that's the on hold. And so the way that is helpful for me to think about this is you've got people that want to come in and get served. And so this is where the board has to set expectations.
Get served?
Get served, so they apply, and then having us service the application is the board's purview.
Okay.
And so the on hold, the preliminary docket is like the waiting room. So the board can say, you know what, we don't have the staff resources at this time, there's other priorities, we're gonna have you hang out in the waiting room. Or if the board is like, okay, we're ready for this, we have the staff resources, please get in line, and our staff will begin working on your application. And then you'll also, the board, get to prioritize that. But really, this is the nuts and bolts after these 20-day comment period, is the decision in terms of setting expectations. And so if you put an application in line and say it's gonna get worked on, and we don't have the staff resources to do it, the folks that you say now you're in line are gonna have a missed set of expectations. But if you tell them you're on hold currently, you're in the waiting room, when we have the staff resources, we'll do what we can to address your application. That helps measure and set the expectations differently. And so those are the three options that you have, is add it, put them in line so the staff can work on it, put them in the waiting room, or it's not something that the board wants to consider, and that's the remove. And so it's helpful to kind of think of it in that way. And remember that there's two things happening. There's the research and the decision on the policy request, and then there's the work in the process. And what I said at the very beginning was our staff, the main thing that staff does is process, is to ensure that there isn't a bias of who's running the process, that we have the public input, and that when it's all said and done, if there is an appeal, that some group that opposes whatever the application is can't come back and say the process was rigged because the applicant ran it. And so that's really, when you're thinking of staff resources, is our main job is ensuring that the process stands upon scrutiny and appeal. And so you, as the board, get to determine what those expectations for the applicants are based on add, on hold, or remove, otherwise known as on the docket, preliminary docket, or remove.
I guess, could you also cover, just briefly, a lot of jurisdictions have the pay-to-play model in place, and we haven't chosen to utilize that very much. I've been an advocate for pay-to-play for quite some time, but at least the commissioners ought to know what that is.
So I appreciate
And a lot of jurisdictions do it. We don't do it too much.
So it's a quick and easy term to say pay to play, but it depends on what you're asking to be paid for and what you're asking to have played. And like I said before, the main point of our group, what you're paying for in an application is the process, so that there doesn't appear to be bias. We have, the board has allowed for applicants to pay for research and policy work that's gone into the application. So I think it's a misnomer to say that we haven't worked to find those paths. The Board of County Commissioners, we brought options before them in the past, But it's up to the board to decide how much and how far you want to go in having the process versus the policy. And that's, if we want to have that conversation, I want to make sure that that's the delineator. We can't just say pay to play as an umbrella. We want to break it down between process and policy. Because I think that there is a lot of opportunity in terms of the policy discussion, but I'd caution the board in having a pay to play mentality in the process part of it.
Are you saying that there's jurisdictions that outsource the whole process?
Yes, there are a lot of jurisdictions that outsource the whole process with professional staff.
Or even parts of the process.
Parts of the process.
And that's where I would say that Commissioner Edwards' comment that the county has not used that opportunity very much.
Very much.
Exactly, is true, because there was a year when the board, the then board, chose to allow the applicant, two particular applicants, to pay for consultants who did a lot of the process work, as long as those consultants were arm's length and no,
And I guess I
Before
want
your
to clarify something.
it was before your time, I think it was in 2016. It was
Like they were conducting public hearings and stuff like that?
the hearings, they were doing
can.
community outreach, they were doing the research, they were doing, and the applicants paid the cost and we made it very clear that we would not guarantee that the outcome of that would be what actually got approved by the board.
Right, and
Yeah,
the staff or the county
15. It
would
was a long time.
oftentimes pick the consultant to do the work. The
county
applicant didn't
chose-
always get to pick their own person.
They, neither of these particular cases that I'm thinking about got to choose who did it. One of them was
So
Evergreen
it
State
just
College.
reduces the workload on staff.
But
so
it
that
moved
they
their
can get a
items
project
forward
done.
after they'd been waiting for quite some
Yes.
time.
Yep.
So
So-
we are Evergreen State College, if you could come up with the
I
other one.
I have to look,
Lakeside
Way
Industries,
back.
I think. might
And
have-
so we've had this conversation for the past 6 years. This is the first time that we're hearing about this potential process. We're open to receive. But like we've said in the past and under the previous county manager, we wanted to make sure that the conversation, it's up to the board to determine how you'd like to proceed in terms of process and policy. We have, like I've said, with Lakeside Industries and others, we've helped with the process of having the applicant pay for a consultant. We chose the consultant to do the work, and that's a policy discussion. And so if we want to go further down this conversation, we're open to do it. But I would also then go back to the fact that we're on a pretty good path. We are clicking. And so in terms of process, like we just talked about the successes and Commissioner Minzer raised the roof, the process is working. And so thinking about how we can continue to do more is great. And so when we get to the staff resources conversation, that might be a place to have a consideration about how we could add process with consultants. We're open to receive.
Commissioner Mejia's hand was up. I'm gonna go to her.
Thank you. I guess this question will be saved until we get to staff resources. I was going to ask, the big thing this year is the comprehensive plan, which we have to get done, right? And I was going to ask in terms of how much will we be able to really accomplish? I think having that mindset of like, what is staff availability, knowing that we have to get this big comprehensive plan done, and it doesn't have to be answered right now. I can wait until future slides if it's gonna be addressed then.
No, that's a great question, and it's definitely on the slides. Thank you for that.
That was basically what I was gonna say. On a comp plan year,
Yep.
this alternative turnpike may be something to talk more
We
about.
do have a consultant for the comp plan. And I was just asking Ashley yesterday at public hearing, and you were saying more than 50% of the work of that is gonna be done by these folks.
The technical support work, so the process is still gonna be managed by our team. You know, our consultants they're gonna be up in Seattle. They're gonna be supporting us with a lot of the technical analysis. They'll be supporting sort of in the background, but the whole process of the comp plan, all of those touches with the community is gonna be Andrew, me, the other folks on the community planning team. And that's really important when you think about developing a vision that is based on relationships that the county has with the folks that live here. So, yeah, they are going to play a very important role, but the leadership on the comprehensive plan update is gonna come from the county. What I will say is that because we have them helping on the technical analysis, it does free up a little bit of capacity to do some of these other priorities, you know, like the joint code update and some of the things that are remaining on the docket that we weren't able to complete. And without that consultant support, that might not even be possible.
And let me just throw in one more thing. I'll just use marijuana as an example. And whenever I talk about marijuana, I like to preface it with, I didn't support legalizing marijuana, but the state voters did. So that puts us in a realm. So in the past, we've had commissioners that got in the way of any good, effective changes to the marijuana regulations, for an example, having to do with the industry, growing hemp. Some of it is for fiber, some of it is to get high, whatever it's for. And so you, as a commissioner, we, I guess, as commissioners in the past, have been able to put our thumb on the scale, so to speak, if we didn't like marijuana, because that's happened in the past. But one of the ways to stop it is, well, we don't have enough resources to deal with it. But that's an industry issue that you could go to the industry. You want this thing through, we've got all this other stuff to do. You take it through, all the hearings, pay for it, the whole thing could be done that way and enhance the business end of whatever it's called. I even use the wrong term. What's one of the folks wants us to use a different term. What is it?
Cannabis.
Cannabis, yeah, I'm supposed to be saying cannabis, but I'm old fashioned. So, I mean, there's just ways that we could utilize, not utilize our staff, keep them busy. So a lot of times we'll pick out stuff for the staff to do for government, for, you know, it's our thing we need to have changed. Well, it uses up their staff time. So just as an example, it's out there. We've never chose to use it the way I think it could be used to benefit economic development.
I think that the upcoming slides are what our staff are currently working
Yeah,
on or have been
let's-
working on.
Let's get moving forward.
Slide 10.
Slide 10. So we still have some remaining docket items on the comprehensive plan that we are still working on. The Grand Mound and the community review of agriculture are both underway and at different points approaching a conclusion. The Nisqually sub-area plan just had an open house and it was well attended and well received, and that's moving on real quick. And then, as I mentioned previously, the capital improvement program is an annual update, so we'll be kickstarting that here soon. We also have 2 applicant-initiated requests on the comprehensive plan docket, and that's the Beaver Creek Land Use and Rezone Amendment, as well as the Bar Holdings UGA Swap Land Use and Rezone Amendment.
Can I
That's a
ask,
great
how come we skipped 9?
But we didn't.
We didn't.
We didn't. No, we didn't skip it, but we didn't hardly mention it. Is that because we're gonna talk about that on the 14th?
Yeah, yeah.
That's slide 10 though is a great visual in terms of, you know, a lot of the commissioners will ask, where is this in the process? These bar graphs show you how far along it is in the process. So the further it is to BOCC final action, the further along in the process it is.
When you say Grand Mount outstanding land use amendments, that's multiple different.
Yeah, remember the board decided to split off the ones that could be accomplished and then continue to research those that couldn't.
East and west, okay.
Yep, exactly. Good visual, nicely done.
Thank you.
And then community-driven review of agricultural policies and programs, that's,
It's the LTA zoning
Ag zoning.
update, and so we're gonna kick that off with new briefings. We did have briefings and then it got put on hold because we were waiting for mapping support.
okay.
But that's in response to an appeal, basically updates to our long-term agriculture zoning criteria.
And that's part of the comp plan amendment.
Part of the comp plan,
But
yeah.
we're waiting on maps.
Waiting on maps, so we got
What
very
if-
far along.
Okay, yeah, like what if the maps don't come and the rest of the docket items for that comp plan process don't get the opportunity for that once-a-year opening in a timely manner because we're waiting on these maps.
That happened last year.
It
and we
happened.
peeled those off and voted on them, the board voted on
So do we pull the LTA stuff out of the docket and let those other things proceed?
It would stay on the docket, it just wouldn't be part of that end-of-year package, which
Okay.
is what happened last year. We were hoping to have it be part of that end-of-year package. But we wouldn't necessarily hold off on, let's say, the Nisqually sub-area plan is ready, or one of the land use map amendment projects is ready. We wouldn't hold off on asking the board to make a decision on those. And then we would just push the long-term ag zoning into 2025.
But, Chair,
So good.
another piece of that, it isn't just maps. There was many corrections to the proposal that was given to us that was pointed out at a hearing by citizens.
But those would have been the process ones and not the comp plan ones that
Well,
we
I
already
mean, we
reviewed,
were,
right?
we weren't gonna move it forward until we rectified some of those problems that citizens brought forward.
Yeah, it's maps that are built based on a whole list of criteria. So what Commissioner Edwards is referencing is changes to those criteria. I call it the maps because that's the visual you end up with. But there's a lot of inputs into those maps, a lot of ingredients that the board is still considering and gonna get feedback on from the public.
Good conversation on that topic. Can we move to slide 11?
Yes, please. So looking back at the development code docket, it's always great when the left side is greater. That means we've completed way more than we have remaining. We still have some outliers when those are going to be our Olympia, Tumwater, and Lacey joint codes. I know Tumwater is underway right now. The Shoreline Master Program is remaining on there until we get the thumbs up from ecology to move forward with final action. And then the forest land conversions, we will have a public hearing, I believe, next week. And from there, final action may occur at a later date. And then 2 other remaining projects. And then the Natural Landmark Program is one of the development code docket items that is an applicant-initiated project.
And this is a good one too, and going way back to the beginning of our conversation today, the difference between comp plan and development code. Last year you voted on the plans, the joint plans for the different jurisdictions, the vision of how we interacted in the UGAs, and the next topic is how we enact that vision. So you did the joint plans with the different cities, and now on the development code, so that's completed. Now it's moved over to the development code and how we actually implement those partnerships in the UGAs. And that's where it moves over to development services. So that's how the process works.
And so taking a look at some of the projects on the preliminary docket for the development code is the secret comment period timeline review, binding site plans, adult family homes, storage containers and mobile food trucks, the cannabis-related code amendments as mentioned previously, and the shooting zones. And just pointing out the shooting zone is outside of GMA, it would be something related to public safety. And here's another chart to kind of just show where the projects are in the process. The forest land conversions and the shoreline master program are pretty close to the end, and the rest are kind of at the forefront of the work.
In the transfer development rights program, that is the one where we have received a grant, one that you just recently approved. So that'll be a project that we will be kicking off. The RFP closes here in a week and a half. So hope to get the team on board to support that.
So looking,
And that's an update of the transfer development.
It's an update to that program as well as a number of other land conservation programs.
But we
that's the
have
docket
had
item.
one in place, we're just gonna be adjusting it.
Yep.
Okay.
so looking forward to 2024 and 2025, all of the projects that are still ongoing, as well as on the preliminary docket, and the projects shown on this slide are all up for consideration. On the comprehensive plan docket, we're looking at Thurston 2045, which is going to be our big ticket item. It's as seen with the grants and all of that. It's a big project, as well as the Martin Way Land Use Amendment and Rezone in the Lacey UGA.
And that one, sorry, we forgot the asterisk, but that is an applicant-initiated application.
And then on the development code side, community planning is kind of looking at new approaches to address things in a much faster rate. And so we're looking at doing a permit review process annual update, as well as carrying on the code clarifications and corrections and new use and standards annual update, along with the less restrictive alternative community housing and a firework provision request from an applicant. So, looking at 2045, Thurston 2045, all of the chapters shown on the borders are all the chapters we must make updates to meet the periodic update. All of the ones shown with the yellow star are going to be funded through the grant. And a lot of the work that's being done in those grant-funded chapters will have ricocheted effects in the other chapters because it is a unified plan for the county.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
And this is a good example of all the other things that staff has to work on that get in the way of applications that come in. So we have to take care of these things. So that's why I'm an advocate for going the other way. So I just like to throw that out whenever I get an opportunity. Thank you.
There's already, as you've heard, a lot of community interest in all of these pieces. And so, establishing a process that maximizes opportunities for the community to provide input into the process for the board's consideration has been at the forefront of our minds as we set this up.
And just as a reminder, which you probably recall from the briefings on the grant, the due date is June in 2025. So
Fast approaching.
rapidly approaching.
Okay, we've already touched on staff resources a bit, funding considerations. We tried to crunch some numbers for you. You just came out of a budget discussions, and so tried to look at the docket through a budget lens. And so as we put this together, we sort of broke it out. We did combine the dockets to make it easier. Otherwise, you'd have like so many bars up there, it'd be really hard to decipher. So 3 general buckets as we think about the docket projects that are up for consideration. We've got Thurston 2045, and that's where you see that cost recovery, Commissioner Benser. So the total budget, or total amount of staff resources or estimated budget that will go toward completing Thurston 2045 is about 1.45 million. Because of, or 1.45 million total, about 725,000 per year. And so that equates to about 5.5 staff. We are fortunate in the case of Thurston 2045 that the state has allocated funding to support jurisdictions going through this process. And so what you see up there is a cost recovery of about 69% in terms of the staff resources that we're gonna have to put into the periodic update. And that is all grant funded. And those are the 2 grants that got approved yesterday.
So when you talk about cost recovery, I guess as someone who has a finance background, I think of that as in a very certain way. How are you using that term?
Outside money.
Outside money.
Okay, so you're not really talking about cost recovery.
Do you have
You're
a
talking
better
about
word for it?
grants,
What's a better word to put instead of cost
grant, or
recovery?
external funding.
External
or-
funding, okay, we can do that.
Cost recovery mean to you, Robin?
Cost recovery means that the county incurs a cost and then it's recovered through various means.
So we'll call it external funding.
I think external funding is
Okay.
much more clear.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I
'cause,
don't have a budget.
When I see cost recovery, I instantly go to charges or fees or,
So one of them is fees.
one of them may be fees,
Yeah,
but
okay.
I don't
External
think of grants in terms of,
So we'll say green is external funding, which encompasses grants, fees, what else? Ashley and Andrew?
Just grants and
Pretty much
application fees.
And then the blue would be strictly general fund or general fund and surface and stormwater?
Just general fund,
Okay, so the
only
blue,
accounting for general fund. And then the total of the bar is the overall cost.
I do have a question. Why couldn't it be stormwater or something like that as well as general fund?
A lot of these fall outside of what the surface and stormwater fund can be used for, not
No, I
all
mean,
of
I'm
them.
just using that as
that
one example.
particular fund, but other county funds.
Other county funds, why couldn't it be some other
stormwater money,
funds besides
trees,
general
or-
fund?
so for this,
Some of it maybe could be a little bit of road fund
Yeah.
if we're talking about making some
we'll
adjustments.
take a look for sure, but this is a big first step in the question that you've asked for the past 5 years, is how much is coming from the general fund and outside resources. So we'll get more fine tooth comb as we go, but this is, I think, a really good first step. And the way to look at this, thank you for going deep on the first one, but let's take a general look. The green all the way across, you can see is the external funding. And so for Thurston 2045 and the comp plan, we've got a lot of external funding. Those are the big grants that you all just approved from Commerce yesterday. The county initiated projects, we've got external funding coming in at 31%. But then the applicant initiated projects, you can see how much the general fund is supporting external applicants coming in. So not a lot of external funding, sorry, coming in on the applicant initiated projects.
Those are all applicant fees and.
So the applicant fees only cover about 14% of the cost of how much it actually takes to engage all of the work that goes into the process. And that goes, I think, making a big circle, back to Commissioner Edwards' point on how do we take that blue and farm out some of those costs.
The blue is 1.6 million based on what I'm looking in the bar graph. Does that sound
I
right?
shifted all the way to the end at applicant initiated projects.
Under 600. Let me, if I added
You're
up
saying
the
in
three,
total.
the totality of the general fund hit
There you
from
go.
this work
Oh.
is 1.6 million.
So he's combining all the.
Combining the three blue
All the
bars.
blues. It
600, 600, and
it should be about that. I could get the exact amount.
400.
So this is a question that's been asked, and we now have the data to answer that question. Our fiscal manager was able to suss this out, so this is another big win in terms of efficiency and transparency. We haven't been able to be this clear on the funding previously, so we're excited to have this conversation for the board and present this information. Anything further you'd like to add, Ashley? Oh, go ahead, please.
Maybe an example would be those citizens that come into the front counter and they don't even get a permit, maybe, right? You're working with folks, So that's just an example. There's probably a lot of other examples.
Yeah.
But that's not in these costs. That's a different question.
That's development services.
That's current.
Yeah, and
We're talking about the community planning side of the.
yeah, so these are applications that have been placed on, assuming they got placed on the docket, that's the amount of staff resources and the estimated budget that it would take to complete them.
Oh, okay, I guess I need to have clarification. I'm kind of talking about generally, any applicant-driven cost, whether it's somebody comes in, talks about it, and then later comes in, and maybe they do make an application. So,
Rezone or something?
yeah, maybe. And so, is this a total of that?
So that is a completely different budget. That's the permit budget that we've talked about in that.
Yeah.
All of the stuff that happens at the counter for
Okay,
permits.
so this part here that you're showing right now is individuals that have come in, that they're making an applicant request, and staff puts in a lot more than what they put in.
Yeah, the application comes through the door, and the amount of time that goes into the process does not meet how much we charge.
So is there, in this particular area, is that an area that we could recover, for an example, by letting the applicant take on certain roles? The consultant, okay, you pick the consultant, they pay for that consultant, so that amount would go down. And so instead of 14% recovery, maybe we'd be getting 38% recovery. I'm just trying to figure out a way how to, kind of like from Robin's perspective, that we actually get something in besides utilizing.
Yeah. Totally, Commissioner. That's where I said just a couple of minutes ago, that's that big circle that comes back to your initial question on how we could potentially reduce the blue on that one. You're right on.
Yeah, so this next pie chart speaks to more of, I think, the conversations that have happened over the last few docketing cycles where we're talking about staff resources. So just visually showing, like, if we broke this one down by year, but the total need for all the projects that we just went through would be about 12 FTE per year. We're fortunate in this year that we are actually getting that consultant support for about 5 FTE, which does give us some capacity to work on more than just comp plan. Which a lot of the other jurisdictions, just so you know, like in Thurston County, the cities, they're not taking anything on their docket outside of comp plan.
That's right.
Outside what?
Comp plan.
Comp plan.
Sorry, I'm a little stuffed up. And then we also have about 5 FTE per year, and that accounts for pretty much everyone on our growth management services team. And then we have folks on other teams that take on projects as they align with their technical skill set.
Are you saying that is this to meet all the projects that are on like, how are you dealing
Oh,
with the?
per year, so that would be, it would be 24 FTE over 2 years, but 12 FTE
Are you
per year.
considering the
Docket
preliminary
items.
docket items too?
Just if you just looked at it all, we assigned, what we thought estimated staff amount would be to each one of those projects, and then figured out what that total need would be. And this is all estimates, of course, depending on, you might think a project looks simple and then you get into it and there's a lot of community interest. It's something you thought would only take a quarter of a staff's time is now taking a half of a staff's time and vice versa. But our best guess looking back was, what we inputted in there. And essentially what we've got is we're short at least 2 FTE.
If the
per
board
year.
wanted to do everything.
I'm just saying that if there's more than 2 FTEs of work on the preliminary docket, then what you're telling me is you've got enough staff to get the things done that have been previously put on the docket,
That were previously.
assuming we don't
yeah.
put anything new.
And that's the success that we're talking about. We
Yeah.
have not had that in the past.
No, we have not been able to say that in the past. Yeah, I was trying to underscore that.
Yeah, so
Because that's pretty different.
that's exactly right. So if we stayed status quo, we'd have the staff, but if the board wanted to put everything that's being presented to you, that will be presented to you on February 14th, we would be short 2 staff. But that's a huge win, because in the past, it's been, so we'll be at approximately 36. Our high water mark in 2017 for items in the preliminary docket was 63. So the work that's happened over the past years to create that efficiency has led us to the place that you can't do everything, but you can do a heck of a lot more than you've been able to do in the past as the board.
I mean, I would just say that I don't want to speak for exactly what it means to be on the preliminary docket, but what I've seen is that when the commissioners were really interested in a project, we put it on the docket even if you didn't have enough staff. But, so I would say that what's on the preliminary docket were things that we were not sure we even really wanted to move. So I'm just saying that it's not just like the preliminary docket's like stuff we wanted to do all that. We just don't have the people. Some of it, we weren't even sure we wanted to do it. So I mean, I don't know that we need to have fully staffed to complete everything on the preliminary docket, because I don't know that I would vote for everything on the preliminary docket myself, just to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and that goes back to one of the initial conversations that I said, it's about setting expectations. And so our staff is gonna work really hard to, when something gets knocked off the list, to rise something up else on the docket, but recognizing that that perspective may not be the perspective that an applicant has, so making sure that those expectations are measured is important.
Commissioner Edwards?
And I guess I want to follow up just so we get a complete understanding, I guess, is under the Growth Management Act, when this was all put in place many years ago, they came up with a funding mechanism of 85% of, I'm using sales tax in this example, purchased in a municipality. 85% goes to the municipality, 15% goes to the county. And the municipalities have utilities and other funding mechanisms as well. So being counties, there was always supposed to be a second phase of the Growth Management Act. It never did take place. And the Ruckelhaus study that was done a few years ago was supposed to come up with some recommendations how to fix this. It never did really get anything accomplished that I'm aware of. Did they, Rob? Yeah. And so when we have issues where municipalities seem to be able to cover a lot of these costs, and we can't, same reason that we would never had law enforcement adequately enough, same reason that Lacey's got 35 people in their parks division and we've got 6. So it's a lack of funding overall that limits what these folks are able to get accomplished.
We're up to 6 parks employees?
What's that?
That we're up to 6? I thought it was 4.5.
Oh, maybe, okay, it's 5. I even hate saying that. It's so bad how, the difference between municipalities and what we've got.
Has there been a slowdown in applications?
There has been.
Yeah, I would say, once we broke through the log jam and were able to get through, I think that the applications that have come through have slowed down.
They've
This is a
slowed
smaller
down,
list.
but I would say that the
They're bigger.
complexity
Yeah.
of them
Yeah, thank you.
is
Here we
gotten
struggle
bigger. So instead of, maybe a staff one of my team members being able to take 3 or 4 through. The ones that we have now are more like 1, maybe 2
You
get
guys,
through.
you can fix the fireworks problem with just sure of it.
And
I
will
believe
say-
in you.
And as we try to build a more equitable outreach program, and as we, hold transparency really close to the kind of processes we set up, they are gonna take longer. There is gonna be more robust community participation. And, their planning commission might work with the project longer. So, yeah, I mean, there might not be as many, but
Complexity is
the
important.
complexity is more.
So we have a couple more slides, the next steps, and then it'll be important to have a primer on how to read the docket application, so.
So for next steps, we will be returning on February 14th or Valentine's Day for projects and chocolates. We will go over all the projects included for your consideration. We will also be requesting at that point to open up the 20-day comment period so that we can begin to receive comments from the community. Jumping on to the next one, this is kind of a precursor to what you will be receiving in your next material packet. Each project will have a distinct project sheet that will describe applicant information, a project description, prior board review, so if it's already under review versus it hasn't started yet, and a general locational map. Some are countywide, so it's just gonna be a countywide map. So just keep that in mind.
This is huge. So previous to 2018, the board had to look at the application and all of the details and just wade through it. Staff came up with this one pager back and forth that condenses all the information. And so, this is gonna be your key piece when you're looking at each one of these applications, is use this, and then the supporting documents provide the information that is informed therein. Go ahead, sorry.
And then on the back side, it kind of continues on with a summary of public comment. We'll be outlining all the comments that have been received at prior docket sessions, as well as an overview of the comments we received during the review process. We also have a staff analysis and an estimated process timeline, and then staff resource needs.
And just so you're aware, in terms of kicking off the community feedback portion of this, we are designing, and I think, have we already launched?
We
or
haven't
will
launched,
launch
I
it?
think it'll be by the end of this week. There's some fine tooth.
But a
we may be able to
website
do.
just for the docketing process. We are doing a new type of questionnaire that will hopefully be a lot easier for our community members to use and provide comment during that comment period. So for those community members that are watching, expect that. We'll be sending out email notifications to those folks in our community that want to stay up to date on this kind of stuff.
And then don't miss an opportunity. The board has asked in the past, how do community members get involved with the comprehensive plan? Please share that information. Thurston?
Oh, sorry, Thurston2045.org.
Thurston2045.org. So if you have folks in the community that would like to add input on the comprehensive plan,
There you go.
the time is now, and go to that website.
And that concludes the presentation.
Okay, we're at 11 o'clock. Any last questions from commissioners? All right. Thank you very much, guys. Good job.
Thank you.
See you on the 14th.
All right, sounds good.
With chocolates, I heard.
That's what I heard. You're committed now, Andrew.